Week 7 of the 2025 fantasy football season comes to a close tonight with the doubleheader on Monday Night Football. And we are going to look ahead in today's video to the week number 8 waiver wire ads. This is a very important waiver wire week because there are 6 teams on bye: the Lions, the Raiders, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So your team might be looking ripped in half because you don't have anyone to play. So we're going to pick up the scraps in today's video off the waiver wire. If you guys do end up enjoying today's video, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below if you are new. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 8 must-add waiver wire options for the 2025 fantasy football season. We begin with my number 1 waiver wire ad of the week: Kyle Monangai, running back of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore this week. Kyle Monangai is currently rostered in 7% of leagues over on Yahoo. So if you play on NFL, ESPN, CBS, Sleeper, any other fantasy football platform, then the rostership percentage may be slightly different. Though I will note in some cases there could be a drastic difference from one platform to another. We have seen this throughout the years. We see it in the defense video, where in some platforms there'll be a defense that's owned in 60% of leagues, and then you look at a different one and it's like 20%. So Kyle Monangai, running back of the Chicago Bears, last week he was the RB10 in PPR. Now this is prior to the doubleheader on Monday Night Football, so it is likely to fall with all of these players. Going up against the New Orleans Saints, they win the game 26-14, 13 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown, as well as 2 receptions on 3 targets for 13 yards. In terms of the Bears running back snap counts, last week, DeAndre Swift played 54%, Kyle Monangai 45%, and Roschon Johnson just 1%. In terms of the touches, DeAndre Swift had 20 for 138 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. Monangai had 15 for 94 all-purpose yards and a touchdown, and Roschon had 1 carry for 11 rushing yards. Now, it is important to understand that I don't really think that Kyle Monangai is going to take over and become the lead back in Chicago. I do not think that with DeAndre Swift healthy, Kyle Monangai is going to be this uber reliable running back week in and week out that you just want to love starting in your lineup, right? This isn't going to be the 2023 version of Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, right? The Jahmyr Gibbs and the David Montgomery. This is not the kind of a backfield, in my opinion, where you want to be throwing both of these guys out at a consistent basis. But when there are so many teams on bye this week, if you need a bye week fill-in, there are far worse options than a guy like Kyle Monangai, as well as the fact that he feels like he could be one of the better handcuffs in fantasy football, especially with how good Ben Johnson has been. So if this does end up magically becoming close to a 50-50 split, then maybe we are going to be more excited about Kyle Monangai going forward. But as of right now, he is a guy that, sure, I think is very talented. We've talked about it all year about how I think that Kyle Monangai is better than DeAndre Swift, but ultimately I don't really think the team will ever commit to him being the guy. So as of right now, he's a guy that is a upside start if you need a spot start here at the running back position with so many teams on bye. He is a very solid handcuff, and if something was to happen to DeAndre Swift, we may be talking about Kyle Monangai as a top 18 running back for the rest of the season. Knock on wood, we do not root for injuries. And if nothing happens to DeAndre Swift, there is still a chance that Kyle Monangai can be able to eat more and more into Swift snaps and thus become a guy that may end up being start worthy. So again, while Kyle Monangai isn't necessarily like the quintessential guy that we talk about as the number 1 waiver wire ad that you want to blow all of your fab on, you want to spend all that money on Kyle Monangai, but he is definitely worthy of being rostered due to the upside that he possesses. Then we move to Oronde Gadsden, tight end of the LA Superchargers, going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football, 4% rostered over on Yahoo. Tight end 2 last week in PPR versus the Indianapolis Colts. They lose that game 24-38. In that game, he has 7 receptions on 9 targets for 164 yards and a touchdown. In terms of the tight end snaps for the LA Superchargers, he played 79%. Fisk played 17%. Fisk has been looking for Spider-Man, and 4% for Will Dissly. Pretty clear based on his production this season that the team will continue to operate with him as the tight end number 1. Back-to-back games now with 7+ targets and 11+ PPR points. The team is loaded to the gills with talent. They have Keenan Allen. They have Ladd McConkey. They have Quentin Johnston, who, crazy to say now, just like a year ago, you would have said, you're calling Quentin Johnston a talent? That guy fucking sucks ass. Now in 2025, we're talking about him as a great talent, right? They have Omarion Hampton eventually. They have these great players on the team, but if Gadsden continues to see 7+ targets and 11+ PPR points now in back-to-back games, I really do feel like if he can continue to see a healthy amount of targets in this offense, you are going to want him on your team. So I do think he is the best non-running back add this week. Then we move to Zonovan Bam Knight, running back of the Arizona Cardinals. They are on bye this week. So if you're looking at just a bye week fill-in for this week, you're dealing with the bye-pocalypse. The Bipocalypse Bam Knight might not be your guy. Running back of the Arizona Cardinals, shockingly, only rostered in 22% of the leagues. I would have thought that he would be at least 50%. Trey Benson has now been on IR for the last 3 weeks following his arthroscopic surgery on his meniscus and was at that point expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Since he will miss week 9 after the bye, he is a great fill-in if you need it. I want to note that this may end up being just like a 1-week plug-and-play scenario, but if you need it, he has been productive enough for your team to be fine if you play him, especially with the fact that he's going up against the Cowboys in his next game, and we all know that the Dallas Cowboys cannot stop the run at all. Running back 20 in PPR last week versus the Packers in a tough matchup. They lose 23-27, 14 rushes for 57 yards and 3 receptions on 4 targets for 7 yards. In terms of the snap count, Bam played 45%, Michael Carter played 37%, and Dearness Johnson, the Cleveland Browns legend, played 18% of the snaps. So again, while Bam Knight is far from a long-term option, he is 100% startable up against the Cowboys in week number 9, and I'm very excited to see what he does in that game. Next up, we move to Darnell. Here comes the Mooney, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Miami Dolphins, 29% rostered over on Yahoo. Anytime you get to go up against the Miami Dolphins defense, you are just salivating. You're chomping at the bit to have that game because the Dolphins defense can't stop anyone. Mooney returned from his hamstring injury on Sunday Night Football last night. Wide receiver 28 up against the Niners in Santa Clara. They lose that game 10-20. 3 receptions on 5 targets for 68 yards, 1 yard off of being very nice. I like with 69. In terms of the snaps, this is very clearly London and Mooney's wide receiver room. The rest of the guys don't even see around 50% of the snaps. Sills 45%, Washington 17%, and Kaderil Hodge just 6%. So while Drake London is clearly the wide receiver 1 on this team, Darnell Mooney has really cut into his production when healthy. So Darnell Mooney will continue to put up productive weeks for fantasy. I'm not saying that Darnell Mooney reeks of being this league winner on the Falcons offense, especially with the emergence of Kyle Pitts last week. Maybe Kyle Pitts plays more of a factor inside of this offense, but as of right now, I definitely think Darnell Mooney should, at minimum, be rostered because, again, with so many teams on bye, you can definitely play him this week up against the Dolphins defense. Then we got Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver of the New England Patriots, going up against the Cleveland Browns, 32% rostered over on Yahoo. Wide receiver 21 last week up against the Titans in Tennessee. They win that game 31-13. Absolutely no juice given from Brian Callahan getting fired and Mike McCoy stepping in as the interim head coach. Kayshon Boutte, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 55 yards and a touchdown. There has been zero flow to this man's season at all. Targets come and go like the wind. Good games flow with the awful games. With 6 teams on bye this week, you can definitely play him though, but there appears to be zero consistency to any wide receiver's targets in this offense on a week in, week out basis. I would not be shocked at all if Kayshon Boutte up against the Cleveland Browns legitimately had 10 targets. I also wouldn't be shocked if he had 2 like last week, had 1 reception for 7 yards, right? There is very clear risk here in terms of the snaps for the wide receivers last week. Boutte played 71%, Matt Collins 66%, Stephon Diggs 54%, Demario Douglas, Demario time 23%, Williams played 18%, and Efton Chisholm III played 15%. So again, this is a very tough wide receiver core to assess week in and week out. But if you need that bye week fill-in with how good Drake May in this offense has been playing, Kayshon Kayshon Boutte deserves to be rostered. Now we move to Tyler Allgeier, another guy that I have zero idea why he isn't rostered in more leagues, running back of the Atlanta Falcons versus the Miami Dolphins, 38% rostered over on Yahoo. At minimum, Tyler Allgeier is one of the best, if not the best handcuffs in fantasy football. If something happened to Bijan Robinson, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries. If nothing happens to Bijan, there are crazier starts every week than Tyler Allgeier. Now, this is another guy whose touches bounce around like crazy. He has seen as few as 2 touches back in week 3 and as many as 17 the week prior in week number 2. Last week in that L up against the Niners, he was the RB 56 in PPR. They lose the game 10-20. 4 rushes for 16 yards in terms of the snaps, 88% for Bijan, 23% for Allgeier. His snaps are typically around the 30% mark. So again, while no one is going to sit here and lie to you, I'm certainly not, and be like, oh, Tyler Allgeier's a guy that you want to be starting every single week. Of course you don't, because his snaps and his touches bounce all around, but up against the Dolphins in a game that might be down for the count early for the Dolphins, and there's running the ball a ton, Allgeier could definitely find the end zone in this game. I'm not advocating for Allgeier to be in your lineup this week, but again, if you have to do it, I understand. Now we move to number 7 with Jaxson Dart, quarterback of the New York Football Giants, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. Again, another guy that I'm completely perplexed that isn't owned in more than 50% of leagues on Yahoo, 42% on Yahoo. But before we talk about Jaxson Dart, Anakin Skywalker himself, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you receive a free pick plus a first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. If you don't know how the pick'em works on Underdog, it's incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower for the players. If both picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but all the picks have to hit. So please make sure that you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious on Underdog or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, going up against the Philadelphia Eagles definitely is not the most ideal matchup for Jaxson Dart, but you would have said the exact same thing last time they played the Eagles. And last week, up against the Denver Broncos. Last week, he played the Eagles at home in MetLife in week number 6. Quarterback 3 with 17 completions on 25 attempts for 195 yards and a touchdown, as well as 13 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown. Last week, up against the Denver Broncos, they lose that game 32-33 because the defense absolutely fucked them over. I have no idea how you let the Denver Broncos score that many points in the fourth quarter. I have no idea why teams still play prevent defense, because all prevent defense does is prevent you from winning the game. Jaxson Dart, quarterback 2, up against the Broncos in Mile High. 15 completions on 33 attempts for 283 yards, and not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns with 1 INT, as well as 4 total touchdowns because he had a rushing touchdown, 5 rushes for 11 yards and a touchdown. Jaxson Dart appears to be incredibly legit, and my team, the Dolphins, are still stuck with the statue that just sucks ass and throws a million interceptions. So shout out to the Giants. They found their guy. Speaking of that guy, we got cool Joe Flacco, quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, in a revenge game up against the New York Jumbo Jets, 12% rostered over on Yahoo. Quarterback 6 last week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. W 33-31, 31 completions on 47 attempts for 342 yards and 3 touchdowns, 5 rushes for 3 yards as well. Back-to-back games as the Bengals quarterback with 18 plus points, finishing as the quarterback 13 back in week number 6. I know deep down we all know that Joe Flacco probably can't ride this high for a long time. Eventually, one of these games is going to hit him, and they are going to knock him out. He is going to get absolutely manhandled by some defense because, again, the Bengals offensive line is a disaster, and Joe Flacco has 0 mobility at this point in his career. But up against a Jets defense that feels largely fraudulent, I see no reason why Joe Flacco can't have a decent enough game to be start worthy. And again, we're really only talking about a guy like Joe Flacco because there are so many teams on bye. Now we move to AJ Barner, tight end of the Seattle Seahawks. If you need a bye week fill-in at tight end, AJ Barner would not be that guy since he is on bye this week, 17% rostered on Yahoo. Now, Barner faces the Texans tonight on Monday Night Football, the second of 2 Monday Night Football games, and if he goes out there and isn't really involved and has a bad game, then you can just skip this part, just disregard. Tight end 18 in week 6 at the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. 3 receptions on 3 targets for 71 yards, 3 straight 10-plus point PPR showings. So if AJ Barner could just get to like 5+ targets with how much Sam Darnold is utilizing him inside of the red zone, I would feel very good about AJ Barner. Now we move to another bye week fill-in at the quarterback position. Michael Penix, quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Miami Dolphins, 24% rostered on Yahoo. Quarterback 16 last week at SF. They lose the game 10-20, 21 completions on 38 attempts for 241 yards and a score. 2 rushes for 6 yards. Penix has been up and down all year. If there ever was a game for him to get back to the top, the rocky top of the mountain, it would be up against the Dolphins defense that cannot stop anyone. Now we move to Brashard Smith, running back of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders in prime time. Shout out to Deion Sanders, 6% rostered over on Yahoo. Running back 12 last week up against the Las Vegas Raiders. They win that game 31-0. 14 rushes for 39 yards, 5 receptions on 5 targets for 42 yards. I want to make this very clear. Brashard Smith is in the speculative ad range. What happened last week up against the Raiders? There's a strong argument to make that was largely a Fugazi performance. Tweet from Ian Hardis would caution a bit with Brashard Smith's usage. 11 of 14 rush attempts in 3 garbage time drives with Mahomes out. Kareem Hunt injured in the first drive, returned briefly on the second drive, didn't play afterwards. So if Kareem Hunt isn't out, maybe we'll have more information by tomorrow. Brashard Smith is the RB3 on this team. Receptions are cool, but still doesn't have a pass blocking snap this season. So again, while he's worthy of a speculative ad, because if he could become heavily utilized in a Kansas City Chiefs offense, he has league winner written all over him, but he also could just be what he is most weeks and not be a guy you even want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Final guy here is going to be somebody touching my Legette. Xavier Legette, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers versus the Buffalo Bills, 6% rostered on Yahoo. Just like with Brashard Smith, I would heavily caution you guys to not blow your fucking fab wad over Xavier Legette. I still think Jalen Coker will be more and more involved as the season goes along. And we've seen Xavier Legette do this before, where he rises like a phoenix, has a good game, people run to the waiver wire, they sprint to the waiver wire, they pick him up, and the guy is just useless. So again, while I'm fine picking up Xavier Legette, because some of you guys, again, you're down bad, there's 6 teams on bye, but Xavier Legette is not a guy that I view very heavily. It's fine to talk about him, and yeah, he played good against the Jets. They win the game 13-6. He's the wide receiver 7 in PPR. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 92 yards and a touchdown. Round of applause for Xavier Legette. I'll give these guys the credit where it is due. But you remember what Adam Thielen did a couple of weeks ago? He has that one game, and then he's sleeping with the fishes, not doing diddly squat afterwards. This could easily be Xavier Legette again, assuming that Jalen Coker works more and more and more into this offense coming off of the injury. 87% of the snaps last week for T-Mac, 80% for somebody touching my Legette, Xavier Legette. Jalen Coker had 37%, 23% for Bryson Tremaine, and 21% for the GOAT, Jimmy Horn Jr. So again, fine to pick him up, but assuming what happened last week is going to even happen again is a little bit crazy. So let me know down below in the comment section if you have any questions. Are there players that I didn't talk about that you're like, Nick, what about this player? You didn't talk about him. What do you think about him? Nick, what about Mason Taylor, who I actually like, but we've talked about him so many times in a row that I don't even think I should talk about him again, because if you watched the videos before, you already got him. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. If you would like defense to stream advice, That video came out earlier today. Make sure you check it out. It's going to be on your screen. I love you guys all so much. Hit that subscribe button if you did end up enjoying. Check out that defense to stream video. Love you long time. As always, hope you guys have a great one. As always, good boy.